Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back, viewers. It's Adrian here from Arcade Attack, and I've got another amazing guest on today's show. We've had a text interview from this gentleman before, but we've got him live in the studio today. We've got Jon Beltran De Heredia, the commander. I probably got your name all wrong. Sorry, Jon, but a real honor, a Commandos legend, a real PC gaming legend on the show. So thank you, Jon, for your time.
Thanks to you. You pronounced it spotlessly. That's awesome. And thanks for the word legend. I guess that comes with age a little bit. And it's an honor for me to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And I think you're our first Spanish guest, actually, on the podcast. We've had many people from around the world, but I think you're the first Spanish guest. So that's brilliant. Look, I love to start, Jon, because, again, I don't know much about. Well, I go to Spain on holiday, but when it comes to the video game industry, I always never really connected the dots. And the last thing I want to do is be rude saying that. But I'd love to know when you were growing up, what sort of game consoles and PCs and did you have access to as a child? And what were your favorite games?
Yeah, I think we always regarded the British game development industry with a lot of admiration back in the day because it was more developed. But in Spain, there's always been a lot of interest in games. I was born in 1973, right? So my early memories of games were the Nintendo Game & Watch series, and those were amazing, right? Like you look at them now and you go like, wow, this is like just like fixed things that barely move at all, right? But back then it was amazing because there was nothing, right? And it was like the world was very different back then. And I think after that, my memories go back to the Atari 2600. We did have one of those, and it was mesmerizing. It was like it's like tank battles, and then like you look at its blotches of pixels that are barely discernible these days. But I mean, since you hadn't seen anything more developed than that, your imagination filled all the gaps, and like. Arguably, you got a more intense experience from that than from today's like super realistic games, right? Okay. And I think for the Atari 2600 was I think the fondest memory or more admiring memories of Pitfall. It was like. I mean, we watched Indiana Jones in the movies back then, and then it was like, oh, you were Indiana Jones there, right? Yeah. It was so amazing. But of course, Atari 2600, you couldn't program it. It was. Before personal computers actually become widespread. But I think my next memories is like suddenly the start of the 8-bit machines. And I got a Sinclair ZX Spectrum, which was like, I mean, there was the Spectrum, there was the Amstrad, there was the Commodore, and there was MSX, right? Those were like the big four families back then. And Spain was mostly Spectrum. Like Spectrum was massively big in Spain. I mean, the price was better. There were some issues with the colors and whatnot, but back then price was a big factor. The Spanish economy was not so developed, and they sold like hotcakes in Spain. No, I know it's not only in Spain, but in Spain it was massive. And thing is, like these computers threw you into the boot up screen is like you can type BASIC. So it's like we learned basic language just from the outset. And like it was a small market back then compared to what it is today. It was not a mainstream, but a lot of people like the manual had instructions about how to program it and whatnot. So that was a start for a lot of people, for me included. And there were some very interesting magazines in Spain for like there was one called Micro Hobby in Spain. It was like in Spanish, but it was about the ZX Spectrum. So programming courses and game reviews. It was all a little bit mixed up back then. It was not such a developers and gamers. It was like everyone was a bit thrown together into the same mess and a lot of excitement. It was. I have really fond memories from that. Yeah.
And I looked on your blog, and I'll put it in the show notes that you started programming on the ZX Spectrum. You actually made games on there. I'd love to know what sort of games did you make? Do you remember the first game you made, and did any of them ever get published, or was it just kind of an in-house kind of thing?
No, I was reading magazines. I was learning from the few books that were available. It was difficult to like the internet didn't exist.
Yeah.
So it's like the world was very different back then, right? So you would read about teams, and it was like mythology, right? It's like it's like, oh, so there are people writing these things, right? So I learned as much as I could from the information I could get, but I was very young. Also, I was like maybe we're talking in '86 or so, so I was 13, and I started learning them, and I learned basic first, then I learned machine. We called it machine code back then, código máquina in Spanish, which was assembly language, which was the way to get some speed out of those computers. But I was not mature enough. I developed some little things here and there, but basically on 8-bit machines, I learned. I wasn't
Right.
mature enough to be able to produce anything valuable. But then the PC came, right? Then very soon after, 16-bit machines, which were the Amiga and the Atari ST, came afterwards, but they were pretty expensive. And, like the Spanish economy was not so developed back then. And like personally, I never had any of those. I would have loved to, but it was not affordable. So the jump was like kind of straight into PC for me. So I started recreating the same stuff I had learned with the 8-bit machines on the PC with Intel 8088 assembly language. And of course, I was learning a bit more, so I was able to do a lot more on those computers. Yeah, and it started growing bigger too, right? Like a lot more people.
Love it. I mean, did you always, in your mind, have the ambition to work in the video game industry, or was it just more of a hobby that kind of evolved? When did you first sort of realize that you're entering the industry? It's a proper job. I'd love to know that kind of story.
Yeah, I think I loved games. I played games. Some games I played quite a bit, but I was never a big games player. But it was, to me, they were mesmerizing because they were like it's like a little world. It's alive, right? It's like there are all these characters doing things, and you can control one and you explore it. It's like, oh, one other big contact for me was arcade machines. Like here, they were set up in bars and also some arcades. But I remember Ghosts and Goblins, for example. Like Ghosts and Goblins, and Terra Cresta, right? And those were like, you didn't have that at home, and those were so amazing, right? So I saw those, and I was like, and it's like, and then you read like this team that has programmed these games, like, so there are people who program this. Like, to me, it was like, it's like, it was like being wizards, right? It's like, I wanted to be a wizard. I wanted to create that. And it's like, everything seemed magical. It's like, you jump and you jump and the character goes and then falls on a platform. It's like, wow. It was like maybe taking early physics in school as well. And it was like, wow. It was like, it was beyond thinkable to me. So I wanted to be able to recreate that, right? I could see that it was a mechanism, it was a machine, but it was actually a world. So it was like reconciling that in my mind was very difficult, but I was determined to learn how to build that, right? And I wasn't so I don't think I had a good understanding of game design, for example. Like some people have a good knack for that. To me, it was the mechanism was magical, and I couldn't see beyond. And I learned to program the mechanisms a little bit, of course, like the graphics first. Graphics programming is very immediate, right? Because it's like you're actually drawing a world. So it was like graphics programming was very often the first thing that you would put a lot of focus on. But I didn't have a full understanding of what a game entails, right? So it's like, so I focused in programming. I tried to do some games, some starts, and I have some funny prototype from back then, but I wasn't able to complete them because my own understanding was limited, right? I was mature enough to learn the programming by then, like when I was 17 or something, but I wasn't mature enough. My vision was not mature enough to be able to recreate a game because it was bigger than what I could fit in my brain, right? So I focused on programming a lot, and I think part of I focused on programming, and I focused on programming most of my career, be it games or something else. But it was confusing back then because there's like the programmers have made this game very difficult. That's how it's like. The programmers have made amazing graphics. The programmers, it's like everything was called programmers back then. It was like that was the word, right? So of course the industry was nascent. It was something very new for everyone, right? So it's like you program games, so everyone who's making games is programming games, and then you learn it's not true, right? It's like some people write the code, some people draw the graphics, because it's a different skill set, it's a different sensitivity. Some people design the game or conceive the game, and it's also a different skill set. Even if some people have more than one, right? Some people have two. Like having two is already amazing, right? And these days it's a bit more separate. But when I see someone who can program, design, and sell, it's like, wow, that's genius, right? It's like just one of those is so difficult, right? And I think if I had a better understanding back then, I would have focused on game design. But programming came easier to me. I was more math oriented, and game design, I think I would have wanted to do that because it was closer to the actual act of creation, right? And I think a little bit, I have a little bit of a hang up there. It's like I would have loved to do that, but course, it wasn't I wasn't good by default on that. My talent was not on that, right? But I could have worked on that. It would have been awesome, but so I wanted to recreate those universes, and I learned all the technical skill set, and it proved very valuable in a lot of ways. So I'm happy about that.
And can you sort of join the dots how you joined Pyro Studios? Did you apply for a job there, or did you work in a game company before then? Because is that right to explain that, Jon?
No, that's perfect, because the world has changed so much, so the same kind of story doesn't work these days. These days you need other stories. Like it's always there's always challenges, right? But it was like I was living in the Basque Country, north of Spain, and I didn't know anyone. Like I was like the only kid in everyone around that small town. Not so small, but it was a minority thing back then. I was learning programming, but I couldn't talk about it with anyone. It was like I'm just this weirdo here. I tried to learn this, and I then was able to contact people, but it was a lot later when I started using Fidonet. It was before the internet. It was this kind of point-to-point network using BBSs, where you would send a message and then you would connect once a day to a remote BBS who would deliver the message to whoever when they connected to the BBS. But that's how I met like the scene of Spanish people. Like you could also connect to international groups, but like the world was bigger back then. It's like everything was very far. So I connected with people, a lot of people from Madrid, people from other areas of Spain, from Valencia, from Barcelona, and but it was so much fun to connect with people who were also interested in those things, right? Like it felt less lonely, and started meeting some of them slowly, like someone who lived like only 100 kilometers from where I was, but took the bus one day and met. It was like, wow, we can talk about interrupts, right? I was flabbergasted. It was like, we can talk about interrupts. It was like it was like that, right? And then we would take a bus to Madrid and meet the people from all over Spain. It was a small group, but it was like the people who were most into programming. And through that, I got in touch with the demo scene. We were producing demos, the early days, PC demos. There were also people doing Amiga, and I met some of them afterwards and remain friends with some of them to these days. And like through those people, I started contacting the Spanish video games industry, which there had been a pretty strong games industry in Spain with 8-bit computers. Like the project, like people are very passionate, people are very creative. There was not so much as an organization. There was not much capital, but there was a market. So there were like several Spanish games companies who I knew through the magazines and admired. But the thing is, like with the change to the 16-bit machines, where projects got more complicated, budgets were bigger, required more organization, and it seems we were not that good at that. The current, like it's called the golden era of they still call it the golden era of the Spanish video games industry. Like games were produced, some like selling in Spain was already at least break even or even profitable, right? So there were a number of publishers, a number of developers, the development studios, and that kind of half died with the 16-bit period. But I got to meet most of those people through this contact through Fidonet on my trips, taking the bus to Madrid. I wrote a book on assembly language programming for PC.
Right.
It was published that was like 93 or something. It was published by a Spanish, very like the top Spanish computing publisher called Anaya, and that reached a lot of people. Like I was at university, but I had it was like the book I would have liked to have when I was learning myself. Right, I had to learn from piecemeal from articles and books, like few books I could get hold of, and it was like I remember trying to learn two's complement arithmetic, right? Like binary two's complement, how you calculate with negative numbers in binary. And I remember reading the explanation in more than one different book or article, and I couldn't understand it. It was like, this is impossible. This makes no sense. I don't know what to make out of this. And then one day, suddenly, I don't know, out of nowhere practicing or something, I was like, oh, I got it. I understood it, right? And then I went back and read the articles and the books, and I go like, dude, this dude didn't understand it, right? It's like he wrote an explanation. It's like, this is not so. It was tough learning, right? So I wrote the book I would have liked to have, right? And I contacted the publisher, and it was like I wrote an article about object-oriented programming in C, which was kind of weird thing. And I read the article now; it was a bit misguided, but it was okay. It was some cool programming. It was, let's say, it was a party trick more than anything else. But they published it, and it was the Spanish edition of the Microsoft Systems Journal, right? It was big in
Nice.
And there was a Spanish version called Revista Microsoft de Programadores, so Microsoft Programmers Magazine. It was like more run-of-the-mill name in Spanish, and I just called there was a phone number, so I wrote this thing and I didn't know what to do with it. Like I called them and sent it, and they published it. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. Like they published an article.
It's amazing.
Like, wow. And I talked to the editor-in-chief or something, and it's like, hey, I've been working on this course for assembly, and maybe he's like, I'll give you the contact of the publisher and try to adapt to them. So they published in a very small collection for usually books that were like Word Perfect 5.1, right? Like the books they lasted a year only, and it wasn't the highest quality, but the book was very popular with students, university students. It was recommended because it was good at explaining things, because it had been so fucking tough for sorry but
it's all right.
It had been so difficult for me to learn that I had the explanations that they were kind. They walked you through the difficulties, right? And that book was like, they made so many reprints for years. It was an outlier in the collection, because lasted 10 years or something, which was super weird. And that opened a few doors. It got me in touch with people and got me I did get some money if I was 19 or something. So any money was a lot of money. But mainly got you some respect and recognition. That was good. And through that and people I met, so I got in touch with the people who were developing games in Spain, and trying to the industry had kind of died. So people were trying to create projects from in scrappy ways. And we started a small company, developed a prototype, and we did put a lot of effort into programming, into learning everything, doing our own 3D routines, with the whole demo stuff. There was a bit of a competition who does the coolest effect, and it was also tough. And the finish always beat us to the best stuff, and that's always the same, right? And then people published source code. We sent source code on diskettes by email, right? And you received that a floppy disk.
Wow.
By email, and we had source code. It was marvelous. There was no internet, right? Just getting the stuff was. I know for people these days, it's difficult to understand. It's difficult for me to understand how it was actually, because it's changed so much. Still today, it's difficult to learn programming or do anything, because there is so much that it's overwhelming. You go I want to learn programming. You're learn programming. a zillion things. You don't know which one is trustworthy or good or anything, right? So, but the challenge is still there, and it's learning programming takes a lot of time. So, and that's how I contacted with the industry and started doing little projects here and there. Got in touch with the Arevalo brothers. I'm not sure if you have talked to them, Javier Arevalo and Juan Carlos Arevalo from Madrid. They had written and published 2 or 3 games on Spectrum on 8-bit machines. So they were a little bit older than me and much smarter. So I learned a lot from them, and they were trying to do stuff on PC. Of course, projects are bigger, they're harder. And I was programming with them, and I was super happy that they welcomed me to the projects. And we worked on a prototype called Headhunter. It was like a sci-fi game. I think that Javier published his nickname is Jare. And it was very cool 3D graphics, very ambitious title. We had like indoors areas and outdoors areas. I think Jare was a big fan of Elite. The 8-bit.
Yeah, that's a great game.
Elite. I never played it, but Jare was a big fan. And I think to me, the biggest 8-bit game from a Spectrum was like Head Over Heels, probably. That was also British. Massive. I enjoyed that. Like they had like a map with 321 rooms. I was like, how do they put 321 rooms in there with their puzzles and their robots and their controls? And it was amazing. So we were doing those kinds of projects, and then we got in touch with the guy who was setting up Commandos. I was setting up development for Pyro Studios. It wasn't called Pyro Studios back then, but then the Headhunter fell apart because we didn't get funding from. We were trying to get funding, but we were very naive in anything business related, or at least I was. That for sure. And the other ones were not like fully business oriented. So it was like I didn't go, but some people went to ECTS, which was a trade show that was done yearly in London to try to get funding. We didn't succeed in that, so it fell apart. So we kind of gravitated towards that initiative, which had funding, because Pyro Studios was set up by the same person that headed Proinsa, which was a publisher, like distributor of several big name publishers in Spain. It's like all the big name publishers back then. Many of them were in the UK. They were originally British, like Microprose or Codemasters, and they didn't distribute themselves in some countries because, of course, setting up a distribution requires a lot of effort and local contacts or not. So they distributed through an external distributor. And in Spain, there was this company called Proinsa, which was a distributor for a number of publishers, like a number of big name publishers. And they were doing well. They were doing very well. They had capital. They had access to capital as well. And so they tried to set up this initiative to try to do an ambitious title. And they started hiring some of the best people they could find. And that's where Commandos kind of started,
I mean, so Commandos was their first game. They've obviously published things before, but that was their first game they were working on, would you say?
They were distributing locally big name titles. Like all the I think Sony had its own distributor. I mean, Sony hadn't entered games yet, but it was in the process of entering. But Nintendo had its own distribution, but a lot of the big names they were distributing through local distributors, and this company had a number of the biggest names. I think THQ was one. I think Codemasters was one. Microprose was one, and Eidos was one as well. So but internal development, they did a couple titles that didn't actually pan out very well, and they were trying to revamp it, and they hired this guy who I was working with in the Headhunter prototype, and there was a team internally, but the team went through a couple of revisions and layoffs. And then he asked Jari and me, as like people who were very experienced in programming, to help out. And we did join. And initially, I was working from Vitoria, where I lived in the Basque Country. and working remotely. So we got this code, reviewed it, and remote work in 1995 or 96.
That's mad, isn't it?
That's madness. Yes, it was phone calls and mail, like post. It's like nothing else. And I started doing some code. I wrote the initial. I had been doing some early prototypes with these brothers I was collaborating with Javier and Juan Carlos Arevalo, and I had developed this prototype. I called it. The name was. I mean, my English back then still needed more work, but it was called Behave. It was like just. It was like top view with sectors. Like Doom had come out. Doom was one of the and Doom was like Castle Wolfenstein, Return to Castle Wolfenstein, 3D, and Doom were two of the things that you installed one day and you went like, the world has changed. It's like
it's incredible.
You are younger, so you don't. Maybe you don't know that experience that closely, but it was like, wow.
I do remember, yeah.
You do remember. Okay, so you're like not that much younger. So and I created some physics routines with like polygonal sectors, free form, right? And I had like behavior of different units. I mean, it was just cylinders from the top. So it was circles, and they were trying to go to different places, and they like kind of got stuck, and then like entered panic mode to find a way. And it was funny to look at, and it turns out that I still wasn't working with the Commandos team. They had decided that in the graphics aspect, they wanted to break the constraints of isometric view, right? The isometric view, I mean, it was an isometric view, but things did not have to be parallel to one another. So graphically, they had kind of decided that there was a gap, there was a huge potential in having graphics which were isometric, so that you have the whole map and you have all the strategy, but things are not aligned to an X and Y axis. Which makes everything, which was like all the theme park or Railroad Tycoon or what's this Molines God game?
Populous and
stuff, right? They were doing those kinds of things. It was super cool. The potential in gameplay was amazing, and people were connecting to that a lot. But the graphics, having everything so orthogonal, so regular, aesthetically, there was some potential to be had by breaking that. So I think that was one of the seed strong concepts on which Commandos was built. I mean, that was there before I joined, and of course there was some very good 3D artists that could do really, really good realistic cartoon or something like that, right? And so the graphics were amazing, but there was it was still not solved how the units were going to move around, and it turned out my free form sectors adapted very well to that. So they bought that code from me. It was like starting. Nice. So they paid me more than I had ever earned, and then I was collaborating with them, and at some point, so they integrated it, and it was really cool. And you had to map all the sectors. It was excruciating work to make that work. It was there was nothing automated, and at some point the prototype was kind of half working. And they were going to, because of course the ProInsat distributors, they knew a lot about business. So it was I'm going to go pitch this to some of the publishers we work with regularly to try to get the rest of the funding, right? So there was some funding initially from this business-oriented family with some access to capital, but it was they knew the business. So it's but you want to pitch the prototypes, try to get funding for them, and not only funding in exchange of a publishing agreement. I mean, you needed a big publisher to reach all the shelves in the world. It was about shelves back then, right?
Of course, yeah.
So there were 3 prototypes for 3 different games, and Commandos was one of them. The other one was Pirates. It was a Pirates game, and the other one was very early tech prototype for something called Cimmeria, like the Conan universe, style of Conan universe.
Oh, right? Yeah, like a barbarian kind of.
barbarian style of universe. But there was only a very early tech prototype that was 3D. That was actual 3D in rendering as well. And the Pirates game was the Commandos showed more promise, so they went and showed it to a number of publishers. I mean, we spent 1 month working to finish that demo. I remember sleeping sleeping like in the office. When I moved temporarily for 1 month to Madrid to finish that, and I was hooked. After that month, we barely exited the office, I think, at all. It was like 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day, whatever it takes to get the prototype ready. And to me, it was like, I mean, I was 20, 22, 23. It was like I was playing the game with people really developing games. It was like I didn't understand anything except the code. I understood the code. It's like. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful to see everything come together. It was super painful to work on that, but I was hooked after that. So I was studying, but I dropped out after that to move to Madrid, and with the idea of taking some exams. And I never finished my major. I wanted to do things, moved to Madrid, and the next year and a half, 2 years, it was like to fit because one of the publishers ended up actually going like, wow, that looks interesting. It's like there were a number of publishers who wanted to kill themselves after the game was published because they said no. But when they showed the prototypes at Eidos, Ian Livingstone was there, who's a legend.
Huge. Legend,
and he had a quick look at the prototypes. I think it was other people. I was in that meeting, but it was other people who were in the acquisitions department or something. They were looking at it, but then Ian Livingstone dropped by quickly and saw the game and said sign that game.
Wow.
It was Commandos. It was half a lucky strike, half a lot of work, and of course, people who could see the potential, right? I mean, the night before the game crashed all the time, and anything you would do, it was something like if you could catch the boat with all the the sailor, or how did we call him, the diver could pick up the boat and put it in his backpack with all the other commandos in the boat, right?
Could you imagine?
Yeah. And that was the simplest one, right? And then it's like he would produce infinite numbers of boats and commandos. It's like, of course, there were a lot of bugs and there was a lot of, but it was like the demo was scripted, and it was run by Gonzo, the project lead, and the lead designer, and it's like he would do only the things that worked, and it was beautiful with the lorry going in and out of the camp, and you could cross the river, so all the core elements were there, right? And it was a very unusual game compared to anything out there.
Yeah, it's quite original.
It was like, on one hand, it was this 3D perspective. It was pre-rendered graphics, and then they were timed because memory constraints were massive, so you couldn't have render it all and have a bitmap. That didn't fit anywhere. It's like, no, you cannot do that, right? It was like tile it so that you have the graphics. The artists were amazing. They could make it look like it was not tiled, right? It was like really very pixel level amounts of detail. The character animations the characters were modeled in 3D and animated in 3D, and then rendered to these tiny pixel dimensions, and then the masks were drawn by hand, and the masks to everything was drawn by hand, and all the buildings were rendered each one separately because 3D Studio Max would crash if you put more than one building in a single scene, right? And then the masks done by hand, that was nuts. It was like you would never want to do that. It's like, and then everything put together by super tasteful artists, and it would look like the story went on. It's like it has to look like the LED model figures, right? Like it's like a LED model come alive, right? And that was one of them. And the design of the game with the very specific characters, with very specific functions, a bit puzzle-like, with some action, but it was absolutely unforgiving, right? And it's like I've understood a bit more of that in later on. I was not involved with the design, but I know some references. For example, was the name Lost Vikings was a reference, right? Like Lost Vikings was a bit of a reference because it was like, yeah, it was a bit of a reference. I mean, mentioned by the creator or lead designer.
The puzzle elements, wasn't it? Yeah.
3 like different characters with different functions, and so there's there is a lot of interesting gameplay there. Of course, taken to World War II, which was like, I think originally was the direction set by Ignacio, who was the business guy who headed it, but it was very into movies, very into World War II. So there was a combination of a number of talents there, right? It was like, and the thing is, like, I would learn how actually that was a lot of years after this. There was basically no Spanish games industry back then. So it turned out that a lot of the best talent in Spain ended up in the same group, right? And many years after, but for me, it was like my first job. I mean, I had done things, I had written a book, I had done projects by myself or not, but like first real job in a team. It was like, oh, it's like you're getting a team and everyone is so awesome and so talented. And it's like, and then I would learn, like, no, that was just, you were super lucky in a given moment. That rarely happens, right? It's like, and it never happens again, right? Or very, in a very difficult way. So it was the gameplay angle, the game design angle, the graphics angle, the programming angle. Also, we were able to build something so very complicated with a ton of massive amount of hours and work, right? But and the business side as well was there. So that was a very interesting experience.
Jon, what a stunning story. I mean, I was going to ask actually what titles or media helped inspire Commandos, and I'll be honest, Lost Vikings, I wouldn't have thought that, but when you think about it, there is some connection there. I mean, I'm guilty of thinking, when you just see it, it looks like a refined, remastered cannon fodder. I don't know if you've heard of cannon fodder, but it's different.
That was already a title that I heard back then. Yes, I never got to play it, but yes, that was also in the books a little bit, right? Although cannon fodder had the attractive of that, it was like cannon fodder, right? It's like no soldier is too important, right? It's Commandos was the opposite. It's like every soldier is important. You have 5 or 3, right? Or 4. Yes, but yes, that was there. Yes,
stunning. I mean, you went for it a bit there. We are massive fans of Commandos, and it just seemed different and original at the time, and I know there were kind of real-time tactic games a little bit, but this is kind of sort of defined a genre in a way. Did you know that you're working on something pretty special back then, or was it just? You kind of said it is all these amazing people. When did you realize that this was actually going to? Well, let's be honest, change maybe Spanish video game industry a little bit.
Yeah, it did. It's a landmark. It's still a landmark. Still, when I meet people from the industry or adjacent industries, I often give the reference because people of the right age, because like people who are younger, not so much, but they recognize it, and it's like back then, just completing a game was such a feat. It's like. Actually, you are not guaranteed shelf space, but it's not like today. There's a lot of information. There's you have engines, you have tools. Like back then, we had to do everything from scratch, so it was very hard just to be able to complete one. Right, I hadn't been able to complete one game before that by myself. And like to me, it was very special because it was my first job in the games industry. I moved to Madrid. I moved out of my parents' place, so it was very special to me. It was the first time I was programming with a big team. It was up to 18 people in total. Programmers, I think, was 8 or something, about 8. But of course, I didn't know how special the game was. Did the team know? Did we know? I think it was a first experience for a lot of us, not a first experience for everyone. But for those who were not, for whom it was not the first experience, as in the first game or anything, it was the first experience of such dimension or such scope, right? So we put in a massive amount of work. Everyone was committed. It was very painful. There was a lot of conflict, but it was all redirected into the productive direction. There was the idea that it was a very good game.
Yeah.
The amount of success that came when it was released came as a bit of a surprise to mostly everyone. I'm sure that the head guys in Commandos, both the game creation side and the business side, had big hopes. Because of course, if you don't have big hopes, why would you put in all the effort?
Oh, yeah.
But it came as it was a bit of a sleeper hit as well. Like I don't think Eidos didn't expect such a massive success, that's for sure. They invested some money in it. I don't think it was big money for what they were investing in titles back then. But then it was released, and like in the UK, it was like 14 or 16 weeks #1 in sales.
That's
so
mad.
we got sales reports every week, and it was like it's #1. Like the first week was like, hey, it's #3. It's like, wow, this is something, right? Yeah, it must be something. I don't know. I don't have the background to understand it, but it seems like something. Like so it's #2 now. Wow. So it's selling even bigger. And then it's like #1, and it's like was still #1, still #1, still #1. Oh, it's been released in Germany. It's killing it in Germany as well. Like
which is a little bit controversial. Yeah.
Yes, selling several times as much as in the UK. It was like, but the enemies are like they still love it, right? So it's like still love it, and we had massive fans from Germany, and it was a big hit in Spain. But it's like there were different levels of piracy in different countries, and back then in Spain there was quite a bit of piracy. I think these days everything is a lot more legit. But back then there was a lot more piracy. It was like it sold like 40,000 copies in Spain. It's like probably 400 people or 400,000 people are playing it, which is true because everyone knew it, and then people learned that it was Spanish. So it's of course like it's like some pride, right? Yeah. People are buying it, so I think it came as a bit of a surprise to everyone. Then the scope of the dimension of the success, because it was very, very big success. It helped Eidos a lot. Eidos was a publicly traded company back then. They had some massive hits as well at the same time, like Tomb Raider. Similar period. But so then they wanted the second one, and they invested really big for Commandos 2. It was a lot more money. It was a much bigger team. They spent a ton of money in marketing and advertising. We toured the world. Like they took us to. I went to the US so many times.
Nice.
And then to Germany, to the UK, but then to Hong Kong and to South Korea and Japan and Taiwan. And you got there, and it's like, there was like the project lead, who was the main guy, and I was the lead developer, but I spoke English, and the project lead didn't. So, and I could be kind of entertaining when talking. So it was I was doing demos, and I was like, so it was like you got to Taiwan, I was like, you're in this. It's like the world was bigger back then. It's like, where am I? It's like, this is so and then you go into a room, and then there's suddenly 30 journalists making questions. It was like, this is unbelievable. Like we barely could believe it. It was good fun in many ways, but it was a very different story.
Since making those small Spectrum games, until it must have been incredible. You must feel like a bit of a rock star, John. Absolutely crazy.
Yeah, a little bit. Then I would have to learn that life is not like that all the time. But
fair enough. Do you have a favorite commando? It doesn't have to necessarily be from the first game, but you can include the sequels. But is there a favorite particular character because of their skill set or personality, or any reason really?
I think I liked Whiskey, the dog in Commandos 2. It was so funny because he never talked, but he did interesting things, and the animations were so. I mean, it's like mostly that. Yeah, I don't think I ever played Commandos like a player plays, because it's like you spend so much time just despairing over every little bug and problem, and you see, like once you go into the sausage factory, not a given you will want to have sausage ever again, right? So it's like games depend a lot on suspension of disbelief, and after you've been agonizing over every single detail and being seen it with all like half-made stuff. It's very difficult to fall into the spell of the game, for at least for me. So of course I played a lot for testing and but and I tried to play as a player, but then I was like I was never. So yeah, my connection with the game is from another point of view, right? From that than what players can have, right?
We got to about Commandos 2 now. You mentioned earlier it was bigger, bolder, lots more funding. But what was there a lot of pressure? It must have felt a bit of pressure to sort of, come up with an even better game and can you remember sort of the early sort of talks and discussions about how we're going to do that, and how easy was it to move on to the sequel?
Am I talking too much? Are we in a time constraint?
I love it. I'm absolutely loving this. So keep it going.
Enjoying it. Great questions and enjoying your company. So then you can cut off stuff later, maybe if it's too,
no, this is perfect.
Commandos 1 was a lot of pressure, like a ton of pressure, but it was pressure of a different type than Commandos 2 because we were kind of isolated, developing. The publisher was not, paying a ton of attention. They would send a producer once in a while. They would send suggestions. We would ignore them unless we couldn't. But it was different. It was development pressure. But Commandos 2, there was a ton of attention and expectation and high hope and whatnot, right? Budget was much larger. Team went we were over 40 people in the team. Like it's the dimension of team where like moved offices and of course there had been a success, so people's egos were a lot more aroused, probably mine as well, right? So the conflict was a bit more difficult, and with the publisher, it's like we were on a high time pressure because Eidos, like what added a lot to this was that Eidos was a publicly traded company, and during the development of Commandos 2, where the ambition had grown enormous. We didn't use a single line of code of Commandos 1. We threw it all down the code and wrote a completely new engine in all aspects, which was necessary because it was a much more ambitious project and we wanted to break all the molds in the original as well. And I think that was a good decision because otherwise it would have been like kind of an improvement or something, right? But of course that set us up for a much more challenging development, right? Commandos 1, as focusing on code, which was my main focus, it was 250,000 lines of C++ code, plus quite a lot of assembly language as well, right? Because all the rendering routines were in assembly because there were no 3D cards and you had to draw every pixel one by one, and the only way to do that efficiently was assembly language. Commandos 2, in the end, it was 1 million lines of C++ code. So just the size of the code was 4 times as much. I'm not even talking about the size of the assets, of the amount of modeling, texturing, rendering, animations, scripting, whatnot, right? And Eidos was investing heavy in this. I don't remember the figures, but I'm gonna pull out of thin air with half an idea. It was like 1.5 million or something, which was a lot of money back then. These days is barely nothing at all, right?
Yeah, pocket change, but
a lot bigger budget. And what happened, which was apart from the expectations, like, oh, now you have to go to present at E3 in Los Angeles, and it's like, so it was a lot more requirements. So Eidos want to a lot of material and movies and animations and this and that. So that took a lot of effort. What happened was that the Tomb Raider franchise started underperforming at some point. I don't remember the details, but what point was that? But suddenly wasn't selling as well. It had been a massive phenomenon socially, not only in video games. Lara Croft was in all mainstream magazines in the world because first female character, strong personality character, whatnot, went so out of the video games themselves that of course the sales were massive, but it's very difficult to sustain that, and you don't sustain mainstream attention very easily for a long time. So of course the next sequels were not selling as much, but of course they were publicly traded. They had to give quarterly results. that's when I learned what publicly traded means and what quarter
yeah.
means. And of course, when the share price goes down because you have announced a bad quarter, they go like, we need to get the share price up because my personal wealth is like of course the executives were part owners of the company, and it's like, okay, so Lara Croft is not performing, what's next? Commandos 2 has like crazy, and it's like, it has to be amazing, it has to be ready by next quarter. It's like, next quarter is impossible. This it's like the quarter after this. I was like, and they would require like absolutely impossible deadlines, and we would say no, and they wouldn't accept no, so we would lie and say yes, and then we didn't fulfill them, right? Because it was impossible. Like, the amount of pressure was like, they had a producer, really nice guy, Mike Suto. I think we made life hell for him, but he was really nice. In Madrid, he was basically located in Madrid, and I think they were start of mobile phones back then, but like calling international, I think he ran up I don't know, like several hundred thousand, equivalent of several €100,000 mobile phone bill or something.
That's so funny.
No, not that much. Like, I remember, like a 10,000 equivalent to €10,000 mobile phone bill, because he was in Madrid trying to get us to do whatever was needed by the time it was needed, having to call back home all the time. Like, these people are, and like, you can't deal with them. They're impossible. This is impossible, right? So I remember receiving visits from high, like top executives, like either Jeremy Heath-Smith, who was one of the founders of Core Design, who were like the creators of Tomb Raider and Lara Croft. They had been acquired by Eidos, but it was like, of course, acquired in both cash and stock. So they were top executives with a lot going on the performance of Eidos, coming to Madrid to get us to deliver whatever was ready. It's like, we need to deliver whatever was ready. It's like, there are only 4 missions actually working. It's like, and it was like, put those 4 missions in the box and deliver it now. And it was like, that's death.
Can you imagine?
It was so high, and it was like, and I was involved in all of this because the project lead didn't speak English, so I was translating, right? So I was learning a lot on the process, and it was like. So it was a huge amount of tension, conflict, and massive bad feelings in all directions. Meanwhile, we had to actually write the game and make it work. Right?
Yeah.
So, and it took, like, I think the delay compared to what they wanted was like over a year and a half. And it was like, and the game, like, so many things have changed from the initial foundations of the game design and of everything, right? The code, the art, the game design. That there were a lot of challenges that were not solved. It's like, how do you make it? At some point in the game, it's like the levels were ready, but the gameplay was not completely clear. So it was like, it was very, very painful and challenging. And this day, I'm surprised we ended up delivering something which was pretty cool, and people, like, market liked it. They were going to. It was like also an influence of stock market. Is like they needed to release their financials every quarter, right, to the stock market, and it's very important to say how much, like, the revenue, like, how do you say it in Great Britain? It's not revenue, it's like
that's right. Yeah, so
there's another word, I don't know, I can't remember now, but
market
it's like
capitalization,
turnover, like British say turnover. Turnover, and it's like, when do you account for the turnover? I learned that day that the turnover is, in accounting wise, is registered the day that the truck, the lorry, leaves the warehouse with not the day the end player buys it. It's when you deliver, when the lorry leaves the warehouse, that day you account the turnover. So it was like, we are going to produce 1 million copies of this. It was delivered on CD. 1 million copies of this CD. It was like 1 million copies of this day one. It was like, there will probably be bugs in the game. It was like, are you sure you will do 1 million copies day one? It was like, yes, and it has to be before the end of the quarter, because that way we register a turnover as 1 million sales, 1 million copies of sales.
Wow.
equivalent, like, I don't know, 50 quid today, right? It was like 60 euro or 50 quid, or it was like 50 quid times a million. It's 50 million quid in turnover, right? That day accounted, registered, and like, so the share price will go up. And then they have 3 more months to figure out what to do to fix their turnover for the next quarter. That's their profit, right? They're investing in many games. So there was a massive amounts of pressure. And I remember the day because those days, crunch mode was a default. I think the games industry has worked a lot in having a half reasonable balance, especially if it's big multinationals and employees don't have an upside on the success of the game. But back then it was like, no, it was hell. It was always hell. So it's like, oh, last day of delivery is like, we're going to spend 3 days working in a row. It's like whoever falls asleep, they fall asleep until whenever they can wake up. And I remember seeing people like falling, and people like, I have to go home because I have migraines. And it's like, I need to go to. And I remember it was September 7, 2000. I will always remember that for some reason. September 7, 2001, we compiled the executable that was going to the factory to burn all those CDs, right? There was like, so it was
1 million of them.
4 days before 9/11 in the
Oh wow, yes, of course.
September 7, and we compiled it, and it was like the person who would become was a lead consoles programmer. He was doing I think he was doing AI and whatnot. Raul Herrero, who is I have a startup now. He's my co-founder, good friend. He compiled it, and I had these pressures like, I have to deliver this, and it's like, at some point it was like, compiled it, and I was like, I'm gonna. We did have email, but by then we couldn't send 600 megabytes over the internet. It took like over 1 day or 2 of uploading, so we actually mailed that CD. But the executable was like a few megabytes. We would send it by email. I was like, and then Raul comes and tells me like, hey, there's a massive bug in the multiplayer code, and it's synchronized. And I was like, and he was working on that, and I was like, stop working. I've sent this. This is over. I mean, I wasn't the key decision maker, but it was like, we have to send this. It's like, okay, it's sent. It has bugs. We will do something. We will release a patch or something. But these people are crazy. They want to send it this way. There's no time. It's done. It's sent. It's this way. 1 million copies of a buggy executable.
Oh, no.
I think I can tell this story these days because people are long moved on to other things. But those days were like, you cannot tell this. You cannot tell anyone this, right? And, then the patches are released and whatnot. But that was the background. Yeah, it was. That was the how do you call it? The back of the scene, right? So the behind the scenes of them.
Oh, really? That's so amazing. How long do you reckon you needed to finish off Commandos 2? Another month, would you say, or would you like?
Commandos 1 was released in '98, in July '98. Then Eidos requested that we develop a mission pack.
Add-on pack.
That the team lead didn't want the idea, but the business guys wanted, and of course, business-wise was probably a great idea. But it was a bit like, because we didn't want to do like just extensions, so we developed like 10 or 12 more missions. That it was excruciating again. And during the development of this, I think it was released in '99. During the development of this, we did start with Commandos 2 with some technical prototypes and whatnot. So I think kind of started in 1999 development, and it was 99, 2000, and 2001, because it was September 2001 we released. So I think it was 2 years and a half.
Right. Okay.
Starting with a few people doing some experiments and definition and whatnot. So Commandos 2 was development started at the same time that the mission pack was developed. So 2 years and a half. If I hadn't made this calculation, I would have said 3 years. And if I go by the raw feeling, it must have been like 10 years. So
yes, raw feeling. Yeah,
it was long and painful. Yeah.
Did September the 11th affect sales at all? Did that, because that was, it's crazy.
Of course, at the first moment, we didn't even know what to think. Like, nobody knew what to think. I think we were there. We were working in the office, and we were like, saw the Twin Towers fall on TV, and I think we were like in denial. It's like, is this even real? It was So
Madness.
we didn't know what to think, and of course, economically, difficult times would come from that. Games have shown time and again that they are very resistant to very big factors economically. I think Commandos 2 was that year it was the top selling PC game in Europe and number
That's mad.
3 worldwide.
That's
And we came about at the same time as StarCraft. It's like
yeah.
StarCraft is like StarCraft is an enlightened creation, right? And we were
That's
there,
mad.
kind of competing there, right? Like we didn't win, but we were competing there. Or StarCraft, or was Diablo 2 came out. It was nuts.
Big
It was
games.
massive legendary creations. So it was very successful, and we toured the world. And I think the main tour was before the release, because of course back then publishers wanted to convince distributors to pre-order a lot of copies, because again, the same reasons, of course, they're protecting sales, which is the most important from their point of view, and makes sense. You have to do that. After that, we started working in the consoles version, but the internal situation at Pyro was not great. There was a lot of conflict between the owners and the CEO and business guy and the project lead and some of the people in the team, and it was all quite complicated. And our intention was to leave the studio and start a new studio. So that was already something we had told. I was joining the team lead in this new company as a co-founder, and we would bring a lot of people from the team to do that, which was, of course, a massive blow to Pyro Studios. But of course, some very talented people stayed, and we were there until we finished consoles, which was 2002.
Yeah.
But of course, the whole environment was not very constructive.
Yeah.
We were putting Commandos 2 into Xbox and PlayStation 2, which was total mayhem and destruction, because the game was developed for PC. We were using massive. We had to put a ton of work in one, of course, redoing the user interface to something that could be playable with a gamepad. We opted for a third person but subjective view, right? So you would actually take control of each commando in turn. I mean, you could take control of more than one, but mainly you were taking control of one and would move directionally, which was, I think I loved that. It was a very different feeling. Same graphics, same kind of
look and feel, but
it felt so much more immersive. And so the UI took a lot of work, and then there was the problem of putting 128 megabytes of working set that the game used into PlayStation 2 had 32 megabytes of memory, and just the executable would take like 5 or 6 of that, because there was so much code for all the behavior. And it was like we spent 1 year just compressing everything into a matchbox sized we did prototypes, like technical prototypes for Game Boy and for PlayStation 1, but that was impossible. It was
no way. A Game Boy version, no way.
We had a Dreamcast prototype that we showed off in the tour in Asia. And it was pretty cool, but that was even less memory. It was 16 megabytes. Xbox was awesome, had a lot more memory. I think it was 64 megabytes. So like Xbox was almost nearly done. Like there was one guy taking care of it. He was like, like making little adjustments to make it like look great, while the PlayStation 2 team was like busy. Like I don't know. We all worked on that. I developed an animation compression system based on quaternions quantized to single bit or 2-bit angles, and it was like developing the craziest encodings to compress stuff that just didn't fit otherwise, right? And then, of course, the PlayStation 2 didn't have a hard drive, so I had to load from DVD, which was, I mean, load speed when you were reading linearly was, let's say, half acceptable. But when you had to seek to any part of the disc, it would take ages, right? And the PlayStation 2 would do a small sound like "eek." It's like every right, and like you were in for a treat. You're like "eek." It's like okay, now I have to wait, right? So I remember we had the maps and scrolling. So the maps were stored like in Commandos 2. It was the entire map was rendered in one scene, which aided in having even richer environments. But then we had to store because if the map was stored like this in rows, right? When you were scrolling up or down, it would need to read one row, right? Every 20 pixels read one row, so you would hear "nyek," but then all the blocks in that row, they would be loaded at once, right? Because they were like following it, so you could scroll up and down quite smoothly, and the scroll speed was set up so that you wouldn't catch the DVD drive reading, right? So that was pretty cool. But then when you scroll to the right, suddenly you need to read one block from each row. So it was like "nyek, nyek, 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 nyek," and you would cut it all the time. So what we did but the DVD was massive. It's like this thing, like you can put 4.7 gigabytes in this. Like wow. So we stored the maps twice. Once ordered by rows and the other one ordered by columns. So depending on when you're scrolling, and if you were scrolling in diagonal, it would read one column from one file and then one row from another file. And then we added like kind of fog of war, but it was like kind of a cool way to hide that sometimes the DVD drive would not catch it, right? So it wasn't real fog of war, but it was cool. People loved it. So, and the game, I think, could have used even more time so that when you entered a new indoor scenario would load faster, or would preload scenarios when it saw that you were going in the general direction or something. But technically it was a massive feat. UI wise, and it affected the game design. We had this called it. I'm sorry, I'm going to technical anecdotes because it was probably what I was really taking up my being not sleeping at night. It was like Coldit's level was like had like 200 rooms, like 200 indoor scenarios, and there were like hundreds of enemy soldiers, right? And it's like it just didn't fit. It couldn't run everything at the same time. So it's like, what if we only load this, and you had these windows and everything, and maybe like 5 commandos. Like, what if we only have in memory the rooms where there is a commando? It's like pretty cool. We save a lot of space, a lot of memory that way. And it's like the other are loaded when you go in, right? And the patrols of the enemies, they are kind of reset. It's like, but there are enemies who have patrols that go through multiple rooms, and that's important to the gameplay. It's like, so we will only load the rooms where there is any commando or the rooms where there is any guard who runs a patrol that goes through any room where there is any commando. It's like, it's more than 5. It's like maybe 10 or 15 rooms that fits. It's like pretty awesome. It's like, then you put in a time bomb in a place and you run away, and then the room doesn't run. It's like, okay, so we need to run all the rooms where there is a commando, where there is a guard that runs a patrol that runs through a room where there is a commando, or any room where there is a time bomb, or any room where there is a guard that runs a patrol that runs through any room where there is a time bomb. So we did have to apply all the tricks. And then we got to the Paris, there's the end final Paris mission, which is like, there are not many indoors scenarios there, but the outdoors is massive. It's like, it's huge. It's like, oh, you cannot have everything in that scenario loaded. So it's like, okay, so they loaded in chunks. It's like, so we had to do all the tricks to put the commandos. I feel super, super happy and super proud about that. I mean, it was mainly Raul and Vicente that did a lot of the work there, and also Unai and myself part of it. And in the UI part, it was Elisa, who was the lead UI programmer, who did that magnificent work in adapting the interface to a console game. She was a big fan of Final Fantasy games, so I think some of the UI inspiration, of course, a very different genre, so not a lot of it applies, but I think it was massively brilliant in a few ways, and would have needed another year of compressing and optimizing for the player experience to be entirely smooth. We didn't have the time. The situation was complicated. The game was good enough. working well enough. It was released, and we left. We started another studio. So that's not another story, but yeah.
Incredible. I mean, did you ever start work on Commandos 3, or was that Commandos 2 was full stop for you, John? Is that right?
No, yeah, it was Commandos 2. After Commandos 2 PC was done, we were like, it was very clear that we were finishing the port to consoles and moving on to set up our own studio. And some of the people who stayed, because we invited a lot of people in the team to join us, but some of them didn't want to. I think like 10 or 12 people did come to the new studio, but which was a huge responsibility. But other people stayed, and then a team was started from those people who stayed, many very experienced. I don't think they had all the... I mean, it's very difficult to do a great project in a challenging market when the budgets get big and the players expect more and more every day, and you have to deliver amazing gameplay and amazing graphics and amazing technical solutions and amazing distribution and amazing business acumen and whatnot. Like, we started the studio and we also didn't have everything that was necessary. We didn't have the business part, and maybe others neither. So we worked on that for a few years. It didn't pan out, although there were great creative. There was great creative value there, but we started not having all the talent necessary, and like you learned that the hard way, right? You need to cover all the bases. So Commandos 3, we didn't do anything in that. I know they started from the same code base, although they revamped a lot of things from there. I haven't played it. I've seen a few videos and a few things. Some of the things they did were like technically and graphically super cool. I think the reception was not amazing, but of course the expectations were super high, and like, it's very difficult for anyone to live to such a tall order.
Kind of linked to that, obviously there were very similar games that have released around Commandos 1 and 2. I'm talking Desperados. There was a Robin Hood game. I think there's loads came out in quite a few short years. Yeah. Did you find that as a bit of a tribute, or did you find that a little bit annoying? Did you play those games, or were you?
I think they were taken as a tribute by everyone. It was like, hey, look, it's like, wow, this is even spawning different new creations based on some of the same principles, and of course bringing a lot of innovation. I think everyone that I ever, like, with whom I ever talked to the team was like, hey, look at this, look, they've done a Commandos in, I don't know, in the Wild West, right? It's like so cool. So cool. And also had amazing graphics, and it's like when you see the side cones of the enemies, and it was a dead giveaway, right? It's like kind of same gameplay taken as a tribute. Yes. I think stealth games, Commandos came out at the time, were also stealth. There were a number of stealth games, so it was part of a family. Probably, and like when the gap is there for something, a number of teams and people discover it at the same time. That happens very often, and stealth was something that was kind of becoming a wave there. And of course, Commandos had the stealth part, and also the multiple character part, and the tactics part, and the graphics. And so, yeah, it spawned a few inspired games. Yeah, I think it was always taken as a good thing.
I'll ask you about your studio in a minute that you set up after Pyro, but I want to quickly talk about Commandos Strike Force. I haven't played it. I put my hands up, but it for me, it didn't really seem to fit the mold. It was an FPS game. It kind of sadly seemed, in my opinion, the end of the Commandos kind of series. They tried something a bit crazy, a bit different. Do you personally think that was a mistake? Have you played it at all? Have you got any views on that particular
I haven't played it. I watched some video to have an idea what they were doing. I think Pyro Studios was in a bit of a difficult internal situation then already. It's difficult to organize a studio with massive high expectations, and sometimes you aim super ambitious and you miss. And the next project, maybe you go like, let's try to be a lot less ambitious and make sure we don't miss because of the excessive ambition. Maybe that was part of it. I'm not party to any of the internal conversations at all, and I have a good interaction with the people who were involved with that, but not deep or not very, very close. It did feel a bit like a weird direction to take. And then I think the direction was a bit weird, and executing that well is really, really, really hard. You've set yourself up for a massive challenge in so many ways. It's not you're not saving anything. You're opening yourself up to new challenges that are very difficult to respond, right? So it didn't work out. I don't know. Most games by default don't work out. They don't pan out in the many titles that are not even completed. So it's like you don't have to look very hard for why not. It's like it's worth looking in when it works out. Like why? What happened here? What stars aligned here such that this worked, right?
Yeah. No, fair enough. And obviously, you know, John, the first two Commandos have had an HD remaster, I believe. I think it's 1 and 2 now. Yes. Were you involved in that at all, or was it?
I think the IP was acquired because Pyro Studios ended up closing. I think the IP was acquired by Calypso, a German publisher, and I was like, oh, maybe they will do something cool. And I watched the videos. The remaster looks cool. There are a couple of things that caught my attention. As I'm not sure I would have done it that way. Like one of them was, it's basically using the same missions and the same graphics, right? You probably need to bring more new stuff to the table for people to actually pay attention. I know, then it's not a remaster. Like there's so many games that start as a reskin. Like when I hear, I feel like even today, because I do work with game studios and publishers, like we're gonna do a reskin of this, and I go like, I know how the story goes. It's like you start trying to do a reskin because you want to contain the budget and the effort and extract some of the value, and it makes sense. Yeah. Or maybe recast things in a better way than the previous, and you end up and then you start, and then you go like, oh, but I will improve this, and I will improve that, and we can add this thing and this idea, and then you're making a new game. That happens so often, right? So it's like, oh, HD remake is like cool, but then it is an HD remake, which is like, you do need to bring, even if you're doing the same game and you're going to keep the same stuff. I don't know. I haven't played it, so maybe there's a lot of new stuff. But the videos I saw, it was like same training maps. And they've improved the resolution of all the graphics, which is welcome. But then, for example, I thought that, I don't know, I'm sorry if they're listening to me because I'm not an expert in animation or graphics or anything. But I was like, you have to redo the animations. It's like, I'm sorry, but you have to, because the resolution is higher and the models are cooler and more detailed. The same animations don't work anymore. They work because they were limited to a small amount of pixels, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how it's worked in the market, and I think there is a possibility of welcoming a Commandos title to the market. I really think so, because the love for the Commandos game is there from a lot of people who still play games. There are a lot of strong concepts in different areas of the game that's still valuable. It's like everything has been done. No, it's like no. There are many angles, and games today take other directions. But you do need to adapt it. You do need to. Some things, it's not just a matter of improving the resolution, but it's like how is a player in 2022? What do they expect? What have they seen? Because it's not the same people, it's not the same moment, and it's like, so that surprised me a bit. But maybe it's worked well. I don't know. It's hopefully they will take this as it was a test drive, right? It's like, okay, this is what we can do with 6 months of work. Maybe there's enough interest in putting in 18 months of work, or I don't know, a larger team or something, and making something even for mobile. Mobile is a clear, like there could be a mobile option. And of course, you need to rethink. There are new game design challenges if you play a mobile, but that's cool. Like, who wants to do something which doesn't involve new challenges, right? Life is short. Interesting, right?
Well, John, you left after Commandos 2, and you hinted earlier you started a new publisher, a new team, what was that? What was it called? And did you release the game? Did you release the game, and what was that going to be? And what ideas were thrown around for your new team?
Yeah, I think it was called Arvirago Studios. And of course, we had just left Pyro Studios after a massive success. So it's like the Commandos team doing something else, right? At least to to the contacts you would talk to and whatnot, right? I remember, like, we started talking to publishers. I remember speaking on the phone with Michael Morhaime from Blizzard. Right? It's like I was a nobody. I was talking to an American. It was like I got to talk to the VPs of all the top publishers because they were like, "Oh, we're doing this, and maybe you want to publish it." And they all responded positively, at least at first, right? So one other thing is we had a massive success, and there are two massive successes in a row under our belts. So we had, like, I learned afterwards that then you have all the interest of investors and publishers. And on the other hand, there's one thing that's called in the world of software development, the second system effect, right? Like the story is like, this team who are working for an appliance manufacturing company, right? And the appliance manufacturing company, they go like, we're going to make our fridge for the first time. We've never made a fridge. Right. And we're going to manufacture the cooling elements and it's like, and we need there's a little bit of electronics. So we need an operating system for the fridge, right? And they go to the software, internal software team. The software team goes like, oh, we have to write an operating system. We have never written an operating system. And they go like, oh, we're going to be super careful. We're going to plan out everything. We're going to be like super conscious of every single feature, minimize the features because this is a super challenging project. And so they write this operating system for the fridge, and within budget and within scope and within the by the deadline, right? And it's a massive success. The operating system for the fridge does whatever the operating system for the fridge has to do amazingly, right? And they are super proud, and the fridge is a success in the market. And then they go like, same team, they go like, and the fact that the company go like, oh, now we're gonna next, after the success of the fridge, we're gonna manufacture a washing machine, right? And they go like, oh, so we need an operating system for the washing machine. And the team goes like, oh, we know this down pat. We're the best, the most amazing people ever in doing operating systems. So we're gonna write the operating system from outer space. It's going to be an operating system that works for washing machines, laundromats, fridges, ovens, microwaves, ovens, satellites, and everything. And it's going to have this amazing long list of features, and it's going to have all this potential, and it's going to be the best operating system ever. And of course, they crash hard. They developed something super ambitious because you have the confidence from what you have just done, right? So you're not careful enough, and of course, maybe you do some amazing work, but you don't take every factor into account. I think we had that other part. We were excessively confident after the Commandos games, and we set out to do a very ambitious title. Again, completely new gameplay. We had some trouble finding a publisher because every publisher was willing to sign Commandos' next game. It's like they wouldn't mind set up in another world, if it was set up in another environment, as long as they saw the side cones there, they would be like, I signed this because this is going to sell, right? But we're like, no, this is a fantasy game where you have like real-time combat and exploration, and the graphics are like super innovative. And the truth is, like, we did a lot of really super cool stuff technically that were ahead of its time, and we it raised many eyebrows when we showed it to publishers, and we did sign with a publisher for some time with Take-Two, gathering of developers back then, and we got VC investment, and so we had all the factors on our side, but we were not business savvy either. We were good at what we were, and we were overconfident, and it became quite messy. It took us a few years. And there was some cool prototype, very cool art, very cool gameplay concepts, a lot of development, but it didn't pan out. The project was never finished. There was interest at some point from Atari. I think Atari was willing to sign it if we turned it into a Magic the Gathering title. So it was like, they have a license to Magic the Gathering. It's like, so if you call this Magic the Gathering Adventures or something, and we put in the characters of Magic the Gathering, and we were arrogant enough that we didn't do that. We were just like, no, this creation is so amazing, so unique that we will never spoil it, or we'll never taint it by tying it to something else. And the business savvy way would be like, we do something, an IP with Atari's IP. We get funding to pay, to survive, to solidify, to grow, and we develop the other amazing creation on the side. That's business savvy, and we were not business savvy. So that was also a lot of work. It was painful, and it unfortunately did end up in a published title. There were some cool videos out there. I don't even know where those are anymore. And hopefully a lot of lessons learned for everyone involved. Definitely a lot of lessons learned for me.
What was the game called? Did it have a title in your mind at all? Or?
Yeah, The Lord of the Creatures. That was the title.
Lord of the Creatures, right.
So you had a hero who would invoke creatures using magic of different sides. So there was a lot of magic influence there, but the creatures were others, and there were many. Like one of the things, there were many iterations of the game with very different gameplay designs, and of course that's a time sink and a budget sink, right? So a lot of cool potential there, but it like,
I don't want to make you feel sad, but that must feel a bit gutting, because obviously it sounds like a title with a lot of potential, and and there was opportunities, and I guess if you could turn back the clock, maybe you would do the Atari thing, but I guess you can't go back in time, can you?
Yeah, I think by then that was towards the end as well, and I left a bit earlier than the studio actually closed shop, because the internal situation was not great, and it took a long time to set things up so that they didn't depend on me, but because some things depended on me, not everything, obviously, but some things like the English, for example, that was a big part there. But they continued trying to do it, and they created some really cool stuff. I know that they did, like a multiplayer game. They recast it as a micropayments title, which back then was like the early start of that, as a way to get it to the public. But it didn't pan out again, because I think the business savvy is not just like one aspect. It's like it has to be in the reflection on what to do, and we didn't have that. No, my reading on these things as time goes on, it's like sometimes you get a massive success, or some success, or something that works, something you're proud of. Sometimes you have a lot of revisiting to do to learn the right lessons that you can take out of that, and the lessons are very, very valuable, and you need to learn to see it that way. Otherwise,
I appreciate. Jon, you're such so honest, and so nice to hear this, and I really do appreciate the stories. I mean, obviously Commandos 3 was such. Well, it was the biggest. It was one of the biggest games in Europe, in the world at one point. It's crazy, and then
I'm not sure I believe it yet. It's like, is this real, or is this a dream? And then someone like you goes like, says like, hey, shall we do an interview? The Commandos are like, cool, let's. So it must not have completely a dream, or I'm dreaming about some interesting people as well, like Adrian, right? Making up that. No,
I replayed it again recently, Commandos. It holds up. It's not the remaster. I played the proper original one on Steam, and it's so good still. It's a great game. I mean, was that the end, Jon, for your career in video games? Are you still in the video game industry? Or?
I kind of took off after the whole Larviago thing, because it was very conflicting in many ways, and after that I wanted, like with investors and publishers and other people, and a lot of conflict. In the end, I was like, I'm going to do a project by myself. I just don't want to talk to anybody anymore. I need a rest here. And of course, I'm a very technically oriented, so I wrote a VI emulator, which is a tool for programmers, like super hardcore programmers. I lived off of for a few. It's called VIMU. I'm about to make it open source now, but I've lived off of that for a number of years. Oh, nice. So I was quite distant from the games industry, of course, still in touch with some people. And then I did other things in mobile. I did some research projects, but I was still in touch. And several years ago, like 6 or 7 years ago, started collaborating with Digital Legends Entertainment in Barcelona. It was super cool. Some old Commandos colleagues were longtime Commandos colleagues were working there. and good friends. So I started collaborating with them doing analytics because it was closer to what I had been doing. So, and they were doing free-to-play games. So I was starting to set up the analytics side of it. And after some, and the head of production was Raul Herrero, the guy who was lead consoles developer of Commandos 2. And we ended up seeing that there was a big gap in game analytics tools. There are no good tools, no good technology for game analytics out there. Sorry. There are good analytics tools, but there is space for even a lot better analytics tools out there. And we saw that gap, and we started working on it and set up on our own. We started a company called Catoid. We started in 2017, and it's taken a ton of work, ton of effort, but we're now in production. Started a few months ago, and we're talking to the biggest game publishers and studios. So I'm super lucky. I have a very good network of contacts in games, both nationally and internationally. It was super cool, super brilliant people, smart people. Some people from those days, when you talk about Commandos, they go like, "Oh yeah," so it's like still there. And we are in touch with, I'm working with a lot of game studios. I'm not developing games, but working with studios in helping them in however much data can help them improve their games, which is a super interesting technical problem. And we have some really cool stuff that's still not public, but we're putting it in production. And in a few months, maybe we'll be able to talk more about the details. But you have because it's games people who set out to create analytics, right? It's not usually it's data people who go to the games industry to help. They have a lot of really good data approaches, tools, and solutions, but they don't understand what the game studio is from inside, right? So we have that advantage, and we're again building the tool we would have wanted to have that doesn't exist. So
respect. That sounds, and it sounds like you're using all the experience you've got and gained and helping others. Good on you, Jon.
The successes and the not so successful experiences.
You've seen it all, to be fair.
No, it's if you're gonna run a business or start a business or do, I don't know, I'm sure running a podcast, a retro gaming podcast, has its challenges. You need a pretty rounded view of the things involved if you're gonna do it well, and you don't get a rounded view if you only experience one extreme of things. Right? So
it's true.
Through heaven, and then maybe through hell, and then maybe you are back on earth and you can use that, right? So yeah.
Bless you. No, I agree. Yeah. I've only got a few questions left, Jon. A few quick fire questions from social media, but before I get to those, what are your top 3 games of all time? That's a really tough question, I know, but do you play a lot of video games? And if so, what are your top 3?
I've played. I haven't been a massive gamer, but yes, of course, I've played quite a number of massive top 3 games. I think I should start with Head Over Heels on the Spectrum. That was massive for me. I know one of them, but I want to leave that for last because it's a weird choice. But I want to make that selection. Very hard to choose a second one. Let me say a few titles that come to mind, like Lemmings and Monkey Island, for example. Those are
amazing.
Two that very hard to choose between those two. But for the third one, I have to say one that probably no one who's listening, or very few people who listen to this know, but to me it's very meaningful. It's called Mirtz. It's a mobile game. Mirtz it stands for mildly interesting RTS, real-time strategy, right?
Wow.
That minimalist game by a friend of mine. I met him afterwards. Amir Rajan, an indie developer from the US. He's based in Dallas. He was the developer of a mobile game that was pretty successful on iPhone called A Dark Room, which was a text mode game for iPhone. Top game, but it was like 2014 or 15, so not a lot of people remember. But mildly interesting art. I do recommend everyone play Mirtz.
Okay,
I love RTS. I said like Monkey Island, Lemmings, StarCraft. I played a lot of StarCraft. That was like, and also played our other RTSs, but StarCraft was amazing. I'm still alive, right? So Merge is an RTS distilled to the essence, and I love the minimalist approach. It's like take everything out, leave what's the minimum necessary elements for an RTS to actually be an RTS. That's Merge. There are only circles and lines, and I've played that a lot, and I've played RTSs a lot, but I was never very good at playing. I was okay. After a lot of work, I could kind of half survive, but I was never very good, and I didn't fully understand what's like what is, how does it work, how does design work, why does it work, why is like, of course I understand how you play, but it's like what's behind this an RTS. And this game allowed me to learn what's the essence of an RTS, and I became really good at Merge, and I beat the creator of the game, Amir Rajan, playing multiplayer like repeatedly. I was like, dude, I can beat you all the time, right? He does very minimalist game. He's a very indie type game. He loves the minimalist type. He's gonna come. Actually, I'm gonna see him in a couple of weeks because he's coming visit. So, and that game was very meaningful because it let me learn about RTSs and let me learn about why I wasn't playing well. I was like, I had to turn my perspective to have a more of a big picture perspective of the whole game at the same time. I tend to look into details, and with that game allowed me to gain a more wider perspective on things, right? Not just there. So it's like, I think it was a meaningful game to me, right? And it's a worth playing for anyone who likes RTSs. I think Amir Rajan he still improves it, but he should turn this into a massive big hit, which has the potential to be. But
listeners, viewers, get involved. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just telling our listeners and viewers to try it out. Definitely give it a download.
Yes.
Right, Joe, I've got a couple real quick fire questions from a few people on Facebook and Twitter. I've got a question here from Johannes Roth, and he says, Did you play the revival of the genre, Shadow Tactics, Blades of the Shogun, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, I'm sorry, no, I didn't play any of those titles, and maybe who was the lead designer, creator of the game did and has some ideas, but I didn't follow the genre very much. Yeah.
Fair enough. I've got a question here from Corneliu Vladnaku, and he says, Does John think that games like Commandos would be successful, like mass market today? Do you think that's kind of moved on, or do you think potentially could still be a big genre?
Yeah, I mean, I think the essence of the gameplay, the essence of what makes it fun, what makes it something that is immersive in some way, you can still take that essence and recast it. Maybe you have to recast it. You have to be aware of how people see things these days. And there is the potential, maybe not so much as is, right? Maybe like people like, I see a lot of the time that not on PC, but maybe in other areas like casual games and whatnot, people like easy games. People don't like hard games as much, right? So maybe hard game was doable in that time, and today would have been more lenient, more forgiving. But you can still keep the essence, you can still keep the puzzles, you can still keep the universe that, yeah.
No, great. And actually, that's a few Twitter questions here. Robin, who's a big fan of the show, he says he only played these on PS2, but can you ask John why it's so bastard hard? I mean, let's be honest, Commandos is difficult. Was that something you said earlier, older games were harder, but was that part of your feeling from day one? Make it challenging.
What was the name of the person who asked this? Robin, I'm sorry to tell you that if you only played on PlayStation 2, you only played Commandos 2, because the first one was never ported to PlayStation 2. And I'm sorry to tell you that Commandos 2 was a piece of cake compared to Commandos 1.
Get practicing, Robin. Yeah, I agree. I think I played both on the PC, and the one is difficult. Blimey.
Yeah. The vision of the creator of the game who designed it that way and proved to be very hooking to everyone who played it.
Yeah, frustrating, but kept playing, didn't you, to get past the levels? That's what I found anyway.
Yeah. The right type of frustration is very addictive.
Yeah, exactly.
The right type of frustration, not any type. Yes.
In my tweet, you saw it, John. I said that you also now do singing and some stand-up comedy, and the top load, another big fan of the show, says I don't have any questions, but maybe you can sing a few bars and end on a joke. But there's no pressure to sing. But that was quite funny.
It's a good ending. Like if we're not going back to more serious topics. I've done a lot of stand-up comedy. I'm not doing much these days because work is taking all the time, but a little bit here and there. I did a lot of stand-up in English in Barcelona because there's a big stand-up comedy in English scene in Barcelona. Anyone who was visit, go check out the shows. They're awesome. I did a lot of jokes. I was really unfunny at the beginning, but I learned. So just a couple of jokes. It's the summer now. Like it's summer and not everyone is fit. Not all of us are fit, and you have to go put yourself in a swimsuit. So if you want to get fit, it's like you can do as I do. For example, I go running. It's like, I hate running.
Yeah.
But I want to get laid.
Yeah.
And damn, do girls run fast these days?
John. That's a good joke.
If running doesn't work for you, it's like you can also go swimming, right? It's like something I also do. Is like, and if you go swimming, like there are decisions to make. It's like a young man who decides to go swimming has one big decision to make, which is what swimming pool do I sign up for, right? But a man my age, an older man my age, has 3 big decisions to make when he decides to go to a swimming pool. The first one is, what swimming pool do I sign up for? You don't get rid of that one, right? You still have that one. But there's one second big decision you have to make is like, when I go to said swimming pool, do I want to be my true self or do I shave my back? And that's a big decision. And the third big decision you have to make is, where does the back actually end? So that is... I don't know podcast format, but in live show, those work well. So
very good. John, really appreciate that. And obviously, I'll put a link to your website. I don't know if that talks about all the stuff you do. Maybe is it more on programming? But I'll put a link on the show notes, and you're on Twitter as well. So I'll put your handle in there so people can follow you. But I've really enjoyed this interview. It's been so fascinating, and you've been quite honest and quite a funny guy. I really appreciate your time, and I love hearing these backstories about shaving your back, but now about learning about commandos and stuff. Absolutely incredible. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adrian. That was a big pleasure, big honor, and really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I ask all my guests, John, one final question. Just enough. I think, to be fair, I think you've answered already in the text interview, but you can do a different answer. If you could go for a drink with any video game character, who would you choose and why?
For the love of anything that's real, I can't remember what I responded in writing, but I know I have it's like, of course, I would go for a drink with Lara Croft. That's something I would doubt about. It's like I love the philosophy.
Oh, John, you're a complete legend, and thank you so much for your time. It's been so fun. I really mean that. So thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, and anytime. My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. We really hope you enjoyed it. You can tweet us at Arcade Attack UK. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Arcade Attack UK. Check out our website at arcadeattack.co.uk for lots more retro gaming goodness and to delve into our archives. Our podcasts are also available on Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Please leave us a review and a rating, we'd really appreciate it. If you'd like to support Arcade Attack, please check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/arcadeattack, which will give you access to exclusive podcasts, interviews and other bonus content. So, until next time, take care and we'll speak to you soon.